does it truly mean to be, well-informed in a world that just feels like it's overflowing with information? It's not just about knowing facts, is it? It's more about connecting those dots, seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, and finding those surprising insights that really stick with you. It's about getting past that surface level to grasp how different things, economics, culture, politics, are all tangled up.
Right, distilling the complexity into something, well, meaningful.
Exactly.
And that's really our mission today. We're taking a deep dive into the 18th century, and we're using insights mainly from the story of Civilization ex Rousseau and Revolution. Now, this isn't just your standard political history, which you might think of when you hear revolution. This source gives us something, well, much richer, what they call an integral history.
That's right. And what that means basically is the authors tried to discover and record all these different activities, economic, political, spiritual, moral, cultural, as interrelated elements.
So all connected.
All connected. They said their main interest was the history of the mind, how ideas and beliefs shaped the era, not just the political events.
Wow.
And it was incredibly ambitious. They studied original sources in religion, philosophy, science, literature, music, art. Traveling extensively, they did rely on secondary sources for economics and politics, just because the scope was so huge.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our goal here is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, those key insights from this really rich material. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding an era that genuinely laid so much of the groundwork for our modern world.
Absolutely.
We're going to explore some surprising facts, different perspectives, and hopefully you'll have some real aha moments with us.
Sounds good.
And who better to start with than a man of, well, profound contradictions? Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His life was tumultuous right from the start. His father fled Geneva after a fight.
Right.
Rousseau was raised by his uncle, and his brother just vanished.
Yeah, just disappeared. And his early attempts at formal education, they were, let's say, brief and not very successful.
Right.
Teachers at the seminary of St. Lazare, after just a few months, basically said he was not fit for holy orders. So definitely not destined for the priesthood.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Given those struggles, how a moment like helping two young women on horseback cross a stream could affect him so much. He wrote that his heart beat so violently that one of them noticed it, and that sparked his first real romantic feelings beyond his earlier infatuation.
It's a small moment, but it hints at that tension in Rousseau, doesn't it? The passionate, sort of natural man versus the constraints of society.
Exactly, and that intensely personal, almost raw life is latent bare in his really controversial autobiography, The Confessions.
All right, which he wrote kind of as a defense against his critics. But the government actually banned public readings of it. Yeah. And he describes his first intimate encounter as bringing pleasure, sure, but also this invincible sadness that poisoned the charm. He felt, in his words, as if I had committed incest.
Goodness.
It really shows how these, groundbreaking public ideas often came from such deep, private, tumultuous places. And it challenges that whole idea of reason being separate from human emotion.
And from that deeply personal life came these truly groundbreaking and, equally controversial ideas. Who would thought a philosopher like him would also be a music critic?
Right. It's surprising.
In his Lettres sur la musique française back in 1753, Rousseau just flat out argued, get this, it is impossible to compose music to French words, that the French language is altogether unfit for music, that the French have never had music and never will.
He didn't mince words, did he? That certainly stirred things up. It tells you something about the cultural battles happening then.
Definitely. And what's really fascinating is how his own philosophy shifted over time. He started out seeing virtue as like the expression of the free and natural man.
Yeah, the sort of noble, savage idea almost.
But then later, he dramatically changed his tune, defining virtue as nothing more than the conformity of particular wills with the general will. Big shift.
A huge shift. And that applied to law, too. He once saw law as a sin of civilization.
Right.
But later called it the celestial voice, which dictates to each citizen the precepts of public reason. That move from individual freedom to this idea of collective will, well, it laid some serious ideological groundwork for what was coming.
And of course, these ideas didn't just sit on the page. He faced serious censorship. His books, Emile and the Social Contract, were actually publicly burned in Geneva.
Burned, yeah, and there was a decree for his arrest.
But despite all that controversy, his
Yeah.
ideas struck a chord, didn't they? They had real-world impact.
He really did. He even looked at Corsica under Pasquale de Paoli and saw it as a place open to the lawgiver. He actually predicted this little island will astonish Europe. So Rousseau, this really intense, often contradictory man, became this monumental figure whose ideas both reflected and, actively shaped the turbulent spirit of the 18th century. His life and his thought really highlight the era's dramatic shifts.
From individualism towards these new ideas of collective will.
Yeah,
Yeah, it shows how influential one complex mind could be.
absolutely.
Okay, so Rousseau's radical ideas were definitely revolutionary, but like you said, they didn't happen in a vacuum.
Not at all.
They were forged against this backdrop of huge political upheaval, shifting power across Europe. Let's zoom out a bit and look at that wider stage.
Yeah.
Maybe start with a war that really reshaped the continent,
Yeah.
the 7 Years' War.
Right, the outcomes there were massive. Austria permanently lost Silesia, which really cemented the rise of Prussia, the Hohenzollerns.
Okay.
And Britain emerged as this dominant global power. They seized huge territories, Canada, most of the French Caribbean islands. It fundamentally shifted the colonial balance.
And here's a real historical twist, isn't it?
Yeah.
The war caused the French slave trade to collapse, but British slave merchants boomed. Yet it was in England that the anti-slavery movement first really got going effectively. How does that work?
It's a fascinating paradox. It suggests that sometimes, even when economic expansion is built on something horrific, like the slave trade, it can create these internal contradictions, maybe a kind of moral introspection within that society.
So the visibility of it, maybe.
Possibly. The increasing visibility, figures like Granville Sharp in London pushing for legal challenges. It shows how even in really morally complex times, a society can start to grapple with its own ethics.
Meanwhile, that war also left France teetering, right?
Yeah.
On the brink of financial collapse under Louis XVI.
Definitely. The Contrôleur des Finances, Thierry, tried desperate measures, suspending amortization, lowering interest, new taxes, just to delay the inevitable.
But the deficit kept growing.
Kept growing. And that fed into this widespread, unsettling discontent. And you had this really interesting power struggle bubbling up between the king and the parliaments, the high courts.
Right, and different views on them, too. Voltaire apparently saw the parliaments as these reactionary institutions.
Yeah, an oligarchy of rich lawyers, he called them, blocking progress.
But then someone like Diderot argued they were actually a needed check on royal power, on tyranny.
Exactly. So you see these deep ideological splits within France itself about where power should actually sit. That's a central tension leading right up to the revolution.
A real tangle.
Yeah.
And amidst all this political tension, you had figures like Comtesse du Barry. Her rise as Louis XV's mistress was pretty scandalous.
Caused quite a stir.
And the king himself famously said she made him forget that soon I shall be 60. Gives you a little glimpse into that opulent, often scandal-filled court life.
Absolutely. But France wasn't alone. Other European powers were dealing with their own versions of Enlightenment reforms and the resistance to them. Take Portugal.
Okay.
The big figure there was Pombal. He had this major clash with the Jesuits. He accused them of trying to make themselves masters of the government and having an insatiable desire to acquire foreign riches.
Strong words.
Very. It was a huge confrontation between the state and this powerful religious order, and it ended with the Jesuits being expelled from Portugal.
Wow. Okay, and what about Spain?
Spain, under Charles III, also had its own Enlightenment push. The king really tried to modernize Madrid, garbage collection, better sewage, even banning littering.
It's practical. Was it popular?
Not entirely. He faced resistance and famously quipped, "The Spaniards are children who cry when they are washed."
Huh. That says a lot about trying to force change, even if it's for the better.
It does. But despite the grumbling, the reforms went further. The Moustache sheep monopoly, which was huge, was reduced. They brought in foreign colonists. French and German immigrants settled in areas like Sierra Morena, which actually became quite prosperous.
Interesting.
They built canals, new roads. For a while, Spain's roads were considered the best in Europe. So real ambition in infrastructure and the economy.
And Spain in this era also gives us the incredible artist Goya.
Oh, absolutely. He really challenged the academic traditions by painting ordinary people, common life.
And his etching series, Los Caprichos.
Phenomenal, especially that famous one, number 43, El sueño de la razón produce monstruos.
The dream of reason produces monsters. It's a powerful image.
It really is, and Goya himself explained it. Fantasy abandoned by reason produces monsters. United with reason, she is the mother of the arts and the source of their marvels.
So it's not just anti-reason.
No, it's more nuanced. It's a commentary on the Enlightenment itself, isn't it? A warning that reason, if it's unchecked or isolated from, say, imagination or empathy, can lead to monstrous outcomes. That tension still feels incredibly relevant today.
It really does. Okay, moving over to Austria. Maria Theresa. She was seen as a model of morality, right?
Personally, yes. But apparently her court was quite lax. She even tried to enforce the sixth commandment, the one about adultery among her people, went so far as creating chastity commissioners.
Chastity commissioners.
Apparently so. It sort of highlights the difficulty of imposing morality from the top down, maybe,
Yep.
and the gap between rulers' ideals and reality.
Sounds like it. Now, her son, Joseph II, he took a much more radical approach, didn't he? This one-man reformation.
He really did, dissolving monasteries, regulating church services, pushing for religious toleration, especially for Jews. One town, Brody, apparently became known as modern Jerusalem because of its large Jewish population.
Wow.
And he tried to shift the tax burden, increase peasant income, but that predictably led to major pushback from the nobles. Revolt, even. His ambition for rapid top-down reform really pushed the limits.
And then, of course, there's Catherine the Great in Russia, another one of these enlightened despots.
Very much so. Her nakaz, the instruction for a new legal code, was incredibly ambitious. It showed her reading of Montesquieu, Beccaria, Blackstone, Voltaire.
So steeped in Enlightenment thought.
Absolutely. She wanted Russia to be seen as a European state with a constitution based on European principles. She even advocated for serfs having property rights, for open trials. But her advisors warned her against changing things too quickly. It shows that even the most powerful rulers had, practical constraints.
And her reign wasn't exactly peaceful internally, was it? There were significant peasant revolts.
Huge ones, culminating in Emelian Pugachev's rebellion. He claimed to be Peter III, the murdered Tsar,
Right.
and gathered this enormous force of discontented people, Cossacks, forced laborers, old believers, various tribal groups, and they actually marched triumphantly towards Moscow. It really underscores the deep social inequalities that even these enlightened reforms couldn't easily fix.
Definitely. And her relationships with the French philosophers are legendary.
Oh, yeah. Voltaire called her the Semiramis of the North.
High praise. Yeah.
And Diderot, she bought his entire library, making him rich overnight. But then, in this amazing act of patronage, she let him keep it, paid him a salary for 25 years in advance to be her librarian, basically.
Incredible generosity.
Well, yes, but also a very clear statement, wasn't it? Showing her commitment to Enlightenment ideals, wanting to be seen as a truly intellectual ruler.
It's clear that this whole political and economic landscape in 18th century Europe was just churning. A really tumultuous, transforming stage for all these powerful figures. Revolutions brewing everywhere.
Not just in thought, but in real power struggles, social unrest.
Yeah.
We've seen how the foundations of government and economy were shaking. But the era wasn't just about power and money crises.
Right. There was this explosion of creativity and intellectual energy, too.
Exactly. As the political scene shifted, so did the culture, the art, the ideas. It was all moving together.
French society, for example, sounds like such a paradox. The source calls them a kindly people, even though their sexual ethics apparently violated Christian norms. But they're also prone to knife-wielding college brawls and to street riots. It's such a vivid picture of contradictions, isn't it? Enlightenment ideals alongside deep social tensions and, well, passions.
It really is. And this was the great age of the salonière, these influential women hostesses, like Madame Geoffrin.
The salons.
Right. She hosted these amazing intellectual dinners, drew the brightest minds. She corresponded with Catherine the Great, got invited to Warsaw by the King of Poland. Her letters were prized in Paris, almost like Voltaire's. It shows the huge cultural power these women had, facilitating all this intellectual exchange.
And then there was Julie de Lespinasse, known for being brilliant, but also for a very intense, quite tragic love life.
Yes, her passionate letters, her despair after her lover died. It gives you a glimpse of the era's emotional depths, maybe that more romantic side simmering beneath the age of reason.
And fashion. We can't forget fashion. Those trompeurs, padded bodices.
Apparently so. And Marie Antoinette's influence on hairstyles, shifting from those towering things to more natural curls later on.
Things were changing in media, too. Newspapers were taking off.
Big time. Mercure de France had, 13,000 circulation, and the Journal de Paris became the first French daily.
And the source notes that all this reading made Paris workers intractable.
Interesting, isn't it? Suggests that wider access to information was already stirring up political awareness, maybe discontent among ordinary people.
Yeah. In the performing arts, there was Mademoiselle Clairon. She reformed acting.
Yes, she moved away from that very stylized, forceful, and emotional speech that was common towards a more natural delivery, influenced by Marmontel.
But not everyone was a fan of French culture. Mozart had some harsh words from Paris in 1778.
Yes. He called the musicians mere brute beasts and said anyone who knew anything about music would agree.
Ouch. Shows how subjective taste is, even among geniuses.
Definitely. But despite Mozart's opinion, French composers like François-Joseph Gasseck were doing really pioneering work. He was writing symphonies before Haydn, publishing quartets.
Really? Before Haydn?
Yeah. And he founded the École Royale du Chant, which became the Paris Conservatoire. Huge legacy in music education.
Okay. And visually, art was shifting towards neoclassicism.
Right, influenced by those big excavations at Herculaneum in Pompeii. You see it in architecture like the Petit Trianon enjoyed by both Madame du Barry and Marie Antoinette and the Hotel Salm. This sort of return to classical forms reflected that broader desire for order and reason.
We mentioned Greuze earlier, his sort of sentimental preaching art. Diderot defended him.
Yeah, Diderot called him the first of our artists who gave morals to art. Even Fragonard's famous Roman d'amour et de la jeunesse series was originally painted for Madame du Barry, art serving both high ideals and aristocratic tastes.
Turning to literature, Voltaire.
Yeah.
His output was just extraordinary, wasn't it? And that sharp style.
Unbelievable. His letters, especially the source says the diamond point of his pen flashed into epigram. Almost every other sentence is a flash of light, just a master of wit, using his pen like a weapon.
And across the channel, you had Samuel Johnson, known for his conversation, his colloquial power.
And love a debate. Boswell said he tossed and gored several persons in conversation.
Sounds intense. And his household after his wife died was quite unusual too, wasn't it? With Anna Williams, Frank Barber.
Yeah, it gives you a glimpse into his complex character, a formidable intellect, but with surprising personal sides.
And Boswell's life of Johnson itself was groundbreaking.
Revolutionary, really. People apparently saw it as a new kind of libel at first because it revealed private conversations, unflattering details about famous people. It totally changed biography.
And Horace Walpole, another great letter writer, he saw the world as a comedy to those who think, a tragedy to those who feel.
A great line. Both Boswell and Walpole show that growing fascination in the era with individual character and documenting daily life so candidly.
Meanwhile, in Germany, you had the Sturm und Drang movement emerging.
Right, storm and stress. Think early Goethe von Berlichingen, Werther. Rejecting authority, exalting instinct and feeling.
And Goethe's own life was pretty dramatic. That famous unrequited love for Charlotte Buff.
Who was engaged to someone else, yeah. And his incredibly deep, complex relationship with Charlotte von Stein, which lasted even after he suddenly took off for Italy. It all highlights that emotional intensity, that focus on individual experience that marked this pre-romantic movement.
And this era also brings us the colossal figure of Immanuel Kant.
Huge. His critique of pure reason. Basically trying to figure out the origin, operation, and limits of reason itself.
That idea of the Ding an sich, the thing in itself.
Right, the idea that ultimate reality is unknowable to us, showing the limits of human perception. And he famously inverted the usual procedure, didn't he?
How so?
Instead of proving God to get morality, he deduced God from our innate moral sense, a fundamental shift in thinking about ethics and metaphysics.
Wow. And Goethe later developed his own kind of religion of nature.
Yeah, sort of vaguely personifying nature, seeing mine and will in her, but also recognizing her indifference. And that famous line, Alles Vergängliche ist nur ein Gleichnis. Everything transient is but a symbol. These philosophical shifts show this real yearning for new ways to understand our existence, moving beyond just strict reason.
Okay, and finally, we can't wrap up the cultural pulse without touching on economic thought. David Hume and Adam Smith were challenging the old ways.
Big time. They heavily critiqued the mercantile system, that dominant idea that nations get rich by exporting more than importing, controlling trade tightly.
Right, hoarding gold and silver.
Exactly. Hume and Smith championed laissez-faire, instead let the markets operate freely, minimal government interference. Their ideas were influenced by French thinkers, the physiocrats, who thought wealth came from land, and also, significantly, by the American colonists revolting against British trade restrictions. It shows how political events and economic philosophy were deeply intertwined.
It truly was a period where everything, ideas, art, politics, economics, was just in constant dynamic conversation, shaping each other in really profound ways.
Absolutely.
What a journey through the 18th century. We've seen how this era was just this dynamic tapestry of contradictions, innovations, from huge philosophical shifts to dramatic social changes, all connected. It wasn't just about the big historical events, but the individual lives, those clashing ideas, the ongoing struggles that really shaped it, all brought to life by that integral history approach in our source.
And it's worth remembering, as the source notes, that even Condorcet, who was a great optimist of the Enlightenment, still observed vast areas in which men groaned in slavery.
Right.
So this integral history reminds us that even amidst grand ideals and intellectual progress, harsh realities like suffering, inequality, they persist, often right alongside that progress.
So what does this all mean for you listening now? How do those 18th century dreams of reason, those big ideas about freedom, progress, human potential, how do they continue to play out in our world? Sometimes producing marvels, right? Scientific breakthroughs, new ways of organizing society, and sometimes maybe producing monsters. Unforeseen consequences, social or environmental problems.
It's that Goya idea again, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What echoes of these tensions do you see around you today? And how might understanding this period with all its complexities help you navigate the world now?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to mull over as you continue your own deep dive into the world around you.